What do a railroad tamping iron and a hit from an NFL player have in common? To those on the receiving end, they can create massive personality changes. We're all aware of how popular the NFL and football is here in America. What if I told you that the issue of concussions is a lot worse than the NFL is making it out to be? Today I'll be talking about the brief history of concussions in the NFL, as well as how a man from 1848 is a relevant source of comparison to today's NFL concussions. Finally, I'll talk about why this is relevant to parents and their kids looking to enter football for the first time. So what actually is a concussion? A concussion can be defined as an injury to the brain caused by a blow to the head that brings about confusion and temporary incapacity for basic function. In other words, it is a bruise on the brain that can be as severe as internal bleeding within the skull, or something as simple as a bump on the knee. Looking back to 1848, Phineas Gage, who I mentioned earlier, was working on a railroad with a tamping iron when he hit a spare patch of black powder, sending the rod through the front of his skull here and out the back at the top. Now what this did is it severed his frontal lobe, which is responsible for emotional regulation, planning, and self-control. Now these same three characteristics will change drastically in some NFL cases that I'll be talking about later in my presentation. Starting in 1994, the NFL formed the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee, which was actually headed by the doctor for the New York Jets, and he was infamous for actually sending a player back into the same game where he was knocked clean out cold. Now, the statement issued by the MBTI basically stated they were looking at all health risks to players, which also includes drug and alcohol use and gambling. And they also cited that concussions were not at the top of their list for concerns. So in 2004, a doctor from the University of North Carolina published a neurological paper describing how multiple concussions, like the kind we see in the NFL, are detrimental and extremely debilitating to neurological processes and can affect people as early as the age 30 to 40, as opposed to a more geriatric age of 60 and beyond. The NFL released a statement in the same year saying that they would look into this issue, followed by a second statement where they cited that NFL players were actually good to play in the same week that they were concussed, saying that over 90% of these players were good to return to play within the same week. Now, the changes that we saw in Phineas Gage were also extremely similar to what we saw in Pittsburgh Steelers player Justin Strzylczyk, who began a steady decline into depression and erratic behavior, culminating with his suicide where he drove up the wrong side of the highway and died in a fiery crash at the age of 36. Post-mortem, he was studied by Dr. Bennett Omalu, who was popularized by the movie Concussion, and was the first to actually define multiple concussions to a brain over time as CTE, which is just the technical term. Adding insult to injury to this discovery, the NFL issued a statement where they described that NFL players were actually less likely than normal people to get head injuries, citing that some people are more susceptible to them and they are evolutionarily weeded out, so to speak, by not making it to the professional level that is the NFL. Now, looking at the effect of head injuries in people in general, imagine this on your kids who are 14 or less. So the NFL and the MTBI committee issued a statement where they said players who already had a concussion in a game could not make their situation any worse by returning to play. This started with just the NFL, but was then extended to high school level players and those even younger at the youth level. Now consider how players such as Justin Strzylczyk at the age of 36 decided to drive up the wrong side of the highway. And now consider how a 14-year-old individual with multiple concussions could do something even worse. It's unimaginable. It's also been described that if 10% of parents in America withdrew their children from youth level football, it would collapse football at that level, making it harder for the NFL to recruit players. Over 45 players have been studied and have been found to have CTE post-mortem. Also average in players who retired early, such as Steve Young and Troy Aikman, who both retired due to massive concussions that they received while playing in the NFL. Steve Young himself was knocked clean out cold for over 30 seconds in a game, and Troy Aikman to this day can still not recall a single one game where he was taken a knee to the head and knocked out for 10 seconds. This essentially points to the fact that the safest way to not get a concussion and to remain mentally stable is to stay away from football in general. Thank you.